Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy joins us now. Speaker McCarthy, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Great to catch up, sir. What did you think of that from President Biden? Did Biden just out-Trump Trump?
No, he can't do that. I mean, Biden opposed these tariffs before. And I actually believe when it was only Nixon can go to China, I think a Republican administration always has a better relationship with China and a stronger one. We've watched in this current administration, they've created like an axis of evil with Russia, Iran, and China, something we haven't seen since the 1930s. And there's an interesting piece by Henry Kissinger before he passed and Graham Allison, 79, 79, and 9. 79 years since a great war. 79 years since a nuclear weapon was used, and only 9 countries with the potential of a nuclear, which in the 70s you thought there would be 25 or 30. That doesn't just happen. So foreign policy really matters. The world is in a different place. They're looking for a strong kind of American Western leadership, and I think that's the challenges that we have. And Biden's decision in Afghanistan and what he's just doing with Israel is really harming the world, let alone America. And I think greater stability will go a long way.
When it comes to China, though, Biden and Trump are largely on the same path. Trump is talking about 60% tariffs on imports coming from China on top of potentially a 10% tariff wall for all imports. Isn't that trajectory, isn't that the only place, you know this well, that there's bipartisanship in Washington when it comes to China?
Well, you want to look at it. Trump's policies on China, he believed long before he was ever elected. Biden has flipped his position on China in the last year. So it's kind of what you believe. And I think in China's position, China always looks long term. So if they have somebody in there with a strong position, you usually can negotiate something there. I believe, and I think looking at the New York Times latest polling, Trump, election is today, Trump would win, and probably pretty big. Republicans would have a very big night, that you would have an agreement with China. You might think there's a little tension, you'll get a lot of good news for a while, but I think we would be in a much stronger place because there'd be greater respect on each side, and that's where you could come to an agreement.
But an agreement on what?
I think you could get a lot of places on agreement on trade, agreement on the movement of China and Russia and Iran. I think China moving into the Middle East, bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together, you wouldn't see that as much anymore. I think America would take back the place that they've stood before.
So you were with the former president last night, according to photos I saw online. What are you hearing from him and his team about what 2.0 would look like? Would that also maybe include someone like yourself?
Look, you never prejudge where it is, but I think the president, he's very upbeat. You look at what he's going through. Interesting thing, I think the White House has taken a position, and almost every position they're taking is all political, like this China position, Israel position, what he's looking at. And I mean, if you look at Biden in the last elections, and you're a station that plays with numbers, Biden won the last election by 48,918 votes. But his favorability rating at that time was plus 10. Now it's minus 20. You've got 6 states that are swing states, and Trump has been leading in 5 of them for like 14 months. And now Minnesota, which a Republican has not won since 1972, when Ronald Reagan swept 49 states, he didn't win Minnesota, but now it's a tie within Minnesota. So it's a much different play going forward. And I think their position, they thought going after Trump in a judicial way would help them. I think it's hurt them. You also see independents now. I mean, by a margin of 53 to 42, independents believe another 4 years of Biden will harm democracy. And they say democracy is on the ballot. So it's interesting what they have planned out. And my advice to the Biden administration, if you're in denial, you're not going to solve your problems. And they're kind of in denial of the problems they have.
Can I just ask you a follow-up, though? You didn't answer my question. Would you consider going into a Trump administration?
Look, I would consider to serve anywhere if I'm the best person to. I think in America, we need the best and brightest. But I think that's the last thing you look at. You want to lay out, make sure it's good policies. You want an election to be about policies and ideas. Then people can govern in a better way.
I want to try to strip away some of the politics from the policy.
Sure.
And try to understand, looking forward, You talk about, under a Trump administration, this idea of some agreement with China. I'm more focused on Europe, frankly, because under a Trump administration, it was America go it alone, America first, going out of NATO, really pressuring the European Union to do more. How much is that going to be basically the state of play going forward in the Republican administration at a time where a lot of people are saying you need an alliance to really counter some of these threats that you're talking about?
That's a great question. And we should look, because now we have time to compare what transpired in the Trump administration and what happened now. Was Trump tough with NATO? Yeah, but now you're watching the European nations actually spend more what they had promised to do on their defense, which they haven't. But let me answer your question, okay? Now what you didn't have war in Europe. For the first time in any American administration in modern history, Putin had not invaded another country. Now we have war in Europe. But let me finish your answer to your question. You have 5 American embassies that have now had to be evacuated. We now have a base in Africa where the Russians are now coming into, where you have 1,000 U.S. troops leaving out. It's the place we use our drones and others. So I know what the topic is, and maybe the brushness of Trump's message, but we actually had positive returns within there. So it's a difference of opinion, whether you like the headlines or not, but you really have actual facts on the basis of what a Biden administration looks like in Europe and what a Trump administration looks like.
Although there are long and variable lags with a lot of policies, so it's hard to identify exactly where some of the gains come from, depending on who comes out.
Well, you had the Abraham Accords, which I believe people should have got a Nobel Peace Prize over. But had Biden embraced the Abraham Accords, I don't think you would have had October 7th.
But my question was with Europe, and particularly on the commercial side of things, because what we hear from a lot of executives is they don't know how to even shape policy, given they don't understand what the policy in the U.S. is going to be to European goods. Are they going to start to put up walls to those too to try to really enhance the industrial production of the United States? Are they going to work together? Is there going to be cohesiveness at a time where France seems to open to the idea of accepting electric vehicles from China? How does a Trump administration deal with issues, given the fact that a lot of people say we need these alliances in order to actually win on some of these issues?
Well, I think we have strong alliances. I remember in the Trump administration, I was there with Macron in the White House. I mean, look, every country is going to want to compete with one another. I think what America wants to see is a level playing field. It's a disadvantage if America starts further behind. And France, they want to have a level playing field, but every country is going to compete in different ways. And I just believe that at the end of the day, you will find the policies we had under the Trump administration, the policies we have today, America didn't have inflation. We were stronger around the world. Incomes were rising. And what you're finding in the New York Times polls, America sees that too. And I think the number one issue people are going to drive is going to be inflation, the border, are they going to be the 2 largest drivers of this election.
You don't think that birth control and abortion are going to be a big factor as well?
I do think it'll be, but it'll be in certain spots. It was a big factor in the last election. But remember this. I mean, you also look to what's going to happen in the Senate and what's going to happen in the House. I was leader for 5 years, and every single cycle, when I was leader, Republicans picked up seats, even though Republicans lost everywhere else. When Biden was on the ticket, it was the first time since 1994, not one Republican in the House lost. In the last election, abortion was a very big issue. But as leader, I picked up 5 seats in New York and 5 seats in California. You would say abortion would be the top issues there. So I believe in pockets. Arizona could be an issue. Florida could be an issue. But I think it'll be more in a pocket than it will be national.
You talk about your leadership. Speaker Johnson had 11 Republicans vote to oust him. You only had 8. Democrats came to save him. Are the Democrats in charge of the House at this point?
Hakeem thinks so. I mean, he says it on 60 Minutes.
They saved Speaker Johnson.
Look.
He actually had more Republicans vote against him than you did, but you lost your job.
That's not right, huh? Look, I don't believe in the motion to vacate. I think Democrats play politics on both sides. If they didn't think the motion vacate was right then, why did they think it under me? But it is what it is. It's politics. They think they're going to play it for a political purpose to win. Republicans have a better chance on winning seats this election in the House than they did in the last 2 elections we won. So I think it's going to be a big night. You watch what happened in the primaries last night in Maryland. Hogan is going to make Maryland competitive. And what that does, it expands the playing field. The Republicans are going to win the Senate. It's a simple math question. The presidential election, it's still up in the air, but you look at every polling today, Trump is in the lead, and Biden's doing nothing to change that. In the House, there's a better opportunity for Republicans. The only challenge and advantage the Democrats have is they're beating us now on money rather largely, and that will make a difference.
I've got about 10 seconds left. Can you give us a name for VP? What do you think? Who would you like to see in that seat?
Look, there's some great people. And
10 seconds.
I sat with like 10.
It's a name.
Look, I think Tim Scott is great. I think our governor in North Dakota is excellent.
Nikki Haley?
Look, if he picked Nikki Haley, I would say the race is over.
Yeah, I think
the race is over.
That's the entire party.
If you look at the primaries, even in Indiana,
10.
20%.
I've only got 10 left to the break now, Kevin. We've got to go. Speaker McCarthy, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's do it again soon.